So good day po my dear students. For today's video, we're going to talk about the hypothesis testing process on population mean. So under the hypothesis testing on population mean, we're going to use either the z-test or the t-test. So paano po natin malalaman kung z ang gagamitin natin? We're just going to look at the number of the sample. So n, kapag si n po is greater than or equal to 30, we use the z-test. Pero kapag si number of sample is less than 30, we use the t-test. Ngayon po, bakit po kailangang alamin si samples? This is because on all the hypothesis testing process, we always adhere to this one theorem. And this theorem po is what we call the central limit theorem. Central limit theorem states that our conclusion on the hypothesis testing process is valid if and only if the number of samples is big enough to represent the population. So for example, si Z po, nag-adhere siya kay central limit theorem because it is big na. 30 is big enough na in order for us to conclude something out of that 30 samples. Pero si T, halimbawa, 10 lang ngaya yung samples mo, big enough po ba siya para mag-conclude tayo para sa kalahatan? So, hindi. So, that's why we use the degrees of freedom in addition to the t-test because the degrees of freedom, siya po yung nagsasabi na yung numbers ng degrees of freedom pwedeng mag-vary. Opo? So, to further illustrate how this hypothesis testing process works, let's have this example. So, actually, these examples are actually the examples only that we had on our previous video. But for the sake of continuity, let's make use of those examples. Opo? So for example, a grade 11 researcher reported that the average sleeping time of the senior high school students is 6 hours. A sample of 70 students was surveyed and found that the key mean sleeping time is 6.7 hours. At a level of significance of 0.05, is the claim true if the standard deviation of the population is 2 hours? So, step number 1 po uli natin, di ba? We need to formulate both the null and alternative. So, sabi po natin, ang null and alternative hypothesis ay kailangang nagre-represent sa population parameter. So, ibig sabihin, si average, kailangan na dinidescribe nyo yung population. So, we have two averages here because average and mean are just both average. O, parehas lang naman po silang average or they are just synonymous with each other. However, dito po sa mean sleeping time of 6.7 hours, 6.7 hours galing po siya kay 70 students. Unlike kay average sleeping time na 6 hours, galing po siya kay senior high school students. So, ibig sabihin, ang kukunin po nating value is si 6 hours. However, my dear students, tignan po muna natin kung meron pong mga words na higher or lower in order for us to know na gagamitin or gagawin po natin unang-una si alternative. So kung makikita nyo, wala naman po. So therefore, ang una natin pwedeng gawin or pwedeng i-formulate is the null hypothesis. So in symbolic notation, that is mu is equal to 6 hours. And here naman po, ang kabaliktaran po ng equal is unequal. So that is unequal to 6 hours. Now, in our worded form, kailangan lang po natin na sundin ito pong nasa taas. So, the average sleeping time of senior high school students is 6 hours. Ngayon po, dito po sa alternative, ano nga po yung itinadagdag natin para maging alternative na siya? It is the word not. So we have here the average sleeping time of senior high school students is not 6 hours. Sa step number 2 naman po natin, ang kailangan natin gawin is to identify what kind of test statistics are we going to use. So step number 2, kailangan po nating alamin ang number of samples. So in this problem, what is our sample? That is 70 students kasi yun po yung nakalagay sa problem. So sabi po natin kanina, if n is greater than or equal to 30, we use the z-test. Pero kapag ang n is less than 30, we use the t-test. Now, my dear students, 70 po si sample natin. Is it greater than or equal to 30 or less than 30? So that is greater than 30. So therefore, ang gagamitin po natin ay si z-test. So let's move it again. So hindi pa po tayo tapos kay step number 2. Opo. So for step number 2, again, we have z. Ang formula po natin ng z is equal to the sample mean minus the population mean all over the population standard deviation over the square root of n. So our sample mean here, yung nakalagay natin na sample mean dito po is 6.7 minus what is our population mean? That is 6 hours. So, divided by what is the population standard deviation? So, nakalagay po dito population. The standard deviation of the population is 2 hours. Kaya ibig sabihin, ilalagay ko po dito 2 divided by what is our n? Ilan po yung sample? That is 70. So, ngayon po actually, pwede din naman natin na i-calculator techniques na lang po or i-caltech or dire-diretsyong calculator. However, in my examination questions, nakalagay po doon na kailangan ko po ng pasunod-sunod na flow ng solution. So we have your 6.7 minus 6, that is 0.7. So pwede natin dito isulat na 0.7 divided by, so first, copy po natin si 2 divided by what is the square root of 70. So the square root of 70 is approximately 8.36. So since meron po ditong 6, let's round off to the nearest hundreds. So that is 37. So we have here 8.37. 8.37. Ngayon po, ito naman po yung pwede nating ma-solve dyan. So we have here 0.7 divided by, so 2 divided by 8.37. That is approximately 0.24. So 0.7 divided by 0.24, that will give us 2.92. Okay, for our step number 3, we need to identify the critical value. And sa pag-identify po natin ng critical value, meron lang po tayong dalawang dapat tignan. These are the alpha or the level of significance na kung saan dito sa problem na to, ang value po ay 0.05. At kung ano po yung tail ng test. Makikita po ang tail ng test sa ating alternative hypothesis way back dito po sa step number 1. So our alternative hypothesis is an equal sign. At kapag unequal po siya, that is two-tailed. Opo. So kapag unequal po, that is two-tailed. Kapag greater than po, one-tailed, and it is tailed to the right. At kapag left naman po or less than, that is tailed to the left. So lagi po itong tatandaan. Opo. So this is an equal sign, alternative. So therefore, this is two-tailed. Ngayon po, using our table of values, check po natin. So that is two-tailed daw po. And that is 0.05. So that is positive, negative, 1.96. So yun po yung kakailanganin natin. So that is our critical value will be positive, negative, 1.96. So tapos na po ba? So, hindi pa po yan tapos. Kasi po, kasama po natin kailangan i-graph si normal curve. At under ng normal curve, we have here 0, 1, 2, 3, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. Ngayon po, saan po nakalagay si positive 1.96? Dito po. Malapit lang siya kay 2, but not exactly 2. At dito din po, malapit din siya kay 2, but not exactly 2 po. Ngayon po, kailangan i-plot natin si Z. Si Z po natin is 2.92. So, ibig sabihin po, malapit siya dito kay 3, but not on 3. So, dito po, si Z, which is 2.92. Now, my dear students, kapag nasa shaded region po, this is what we call the rejection region. Pero kapag nandito po siya sa unshaded part, ibig sabihin po, non-rejection region siya. Now, my dear students, I want you to decide, ano po magiging decision natin? Is it to accept null hypothesis or to reject the null hypothesis? So as you can see, nasa rejection region po siya. So therefore, our decision must be to reject the null hypothesis. Ang step number 4 po natin, our decision is to reject HO. At kapag ni-reject po natin ang HO, ang i-accept po natin si HA. So, ang conclusion po natin is that the evidence is enough to show that the average sleeping time of senior high school students is not 6 hours. Okay, let's have the second example. So, dito po sa second example, hindi na po tayo gagawa ng worded na null and alternative because it takes so much space. We're just going to use the symbolic one. However, in our step number 4, we still need to do it in the worded form. Opo. So now, let's have this one. School administrator claims that the average tardiness of the students in his school is lower than 10 days. So lower than 10 days. So we have here HO and HA. So we have lower, mu is less than kasi po lower 10 days. Dito naman po, mu must be greater than or equal to 10 days. So remember po the table that we had on our last video. So susundin po natin yon. Now, let's move to the step number 2. So step number po na 2 natin, kailangan po natin i-identify kung Z or T. So ilan po yung N natin dito? The sample is 100. So therefore, my dear students, sa step number 2 natin, we're going to use still the Z. So C po natin, or yes, raise natin yan. So Z po natin, step number 2, Z is equal to the sample mean minus the population mean all over the population standard deviation divided by the square root of n. So what is our sample mean? The sample mean here, nakalagay po, is 15 days. Sample mean is 15 days. 15 minus what is their population mean? That is 10. All over what is our standard deviation? Sabi po dito, the population standard deviation is 2.5. So we're going to use 2.5 divided by the square root of n is 100. Ngayon po, kailangan natin itong isolve. 15 minus 10, that is 5. All over 2.5, what is the square root of 100? That is 10. Opo, so kahit i-check pa natin. So we have here, the square root of 100 is 10. So, ibig sabihin po, 10 po yung magiging sagot natin yan. Ngayon, let us now divide 2.5 divided by 10. So, before that, let us move again. That will give us 2.5 divided by 10. That will give us 0.25. So, therefore, 5 divided by 2.5 0.25, I mean, sorry, 0.25, that will give us 20. So our answer here, or the z value, is 20. Z is equal to 20. So now, let's move to step number 3. So step number 3 po natin, let's change the color. Step number 3, we need to identify the critical value. So, ang critical value po natin is denoted by C, and it is based on our alternative, the tail of the alternative value or the alternative hypothesis, and also our level of significance. So, our level of significance is 0.01, and our tail of the test is left-tailed or right-tailed. This is a left-tailed test. So, we have here left. So our critical value will most likely to be negative because it is left, because lower. So sabi po dito, it is a one-tailed test and 0.01. So that is 0.01 positive, negative 2.326. Pero dahil nga left, kailangan ang kukunin natin is si negative lang. So we will have here negative 2.326. Hanapin po natin si negative 2.326. So, approximately, nandito po siya. So, we here po si 20. So, this is 20 for example. So, nasaan po siya? Is it the rejection region or in the acceptance region? So, as you can see, my dear students, nasa unshaded region siya. And if it is unshaded region, kasi ito po yung shaded, if it's unshaded region, meaning to say, we need to accept the null hypothesis. So, dito po, our decision will be accept HO. And our conclusion now, in our worded notation, is that the average, okay, before we conclude, let us first arrange everything. The evidence is enough to show that the average tardiness of students in the administrator school is 10 days or more. So the average weighted mean of UM's students as of the third quarter is 89, with a standard deviation of 5. A teacher at a certain school found that their mean average is 92, with a standard deviation of 7. Run a hypothesis test at a level of significance of 0.05. So first things first, we need to identify the null and alternative hypothesis. So we have step 1 here. HO and HA. So that is mean. So una muna pong gagawin natin, identify what is the population mean. The population mean here is 89 kasi siya po yung galing kay yung students. So meron din naman po tayo ditong mean na 92, pero si 92 po ay galing kay 20 students. So therefore, ang gagamitin po natin si 89. Ngayon po, titignan po natin kung may mga words po tayo na magsasabi sa atin ng greater than or less than po ba kay 89. So I want to call your attention to the word higher here. So ibig sabihin po, when it is higher, ang una po natin pwedeng magawa is the alternative hypothesis. So greater than 89, and ano po ang kabaliktaran ng greater than? Less than or equal to 89. Step number 2 naman po, we need to identify if this problem will use t-test or z-test by identifying the number of samples. So dito po, ilan po yung sample? Sabi po dito, she conducted a survey to 20 students. So 20 po, ibig sabihin, we're going to use the t-test because 20 is less than 30. At kapag less than po, di ba, we use the t-test. So t po must be equal to the sample mean minus the population mean all over the sample standard deviation all over the square root of. And so what is our z or x here? The sample mean? Sample mean is 92. So nakalagay po dito 92. And what is our population mean? That is 89. What is our sample standard deviation? Sabi po dito 7. With a sample standard deviation of 7 all over what is the square root of 20? So later we're going to compute for that. So now let's solve. 92 minus 89. So that will give us 3 over 7. What is the square root of 20? 4.47. So 3 divided by 7 divided by 4.47. 1.56. So 3 divided by 1.57, that will give us 1.91. So our value now of z, or I mean t, is 1.91. So that is our value of t. Step number 3 naman po, ang kailangan nating makuha is the critical value. However, since na t po yung ginamit natin, meron pa po tayong isang kailangan gawin. That is the degrees of freedom. And degrees of freedom is equal to n minus 1. So that is 20 minus 1, that is 19. So, ibig sabihin, yung hanapin po natin 19. And what is our level of significance here? Nakalagay po 0.05. What is the tail of the test? So, kailangan po nating tingnan yung alternative natin. So, this is greater than symbol, meaning to say that this is right-tailed. Nung kailangan po nating hanapin yung intersection po nila. So, that is, 19, and that is 0.05 and right-tailed. So, that is 19 here. Sorry, 19 and 0.05. So, ito po. That is 1.729. So, our critical value is positive 1.729. So, sa ating normal curve, that will give us 0, 1, 2, 3, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. So, positive 1.729. Si t po na 1.91 is nandito po siya. So ngayon po, my dear students, what do you think is our decision? Is it to accept or reject our null hypothesis? So we need to reject the HO because it is in the rejection region. So for our conclusion, let's just type it. So for our conclusion, the average, or there is enough evidence to show that the average weighted mean of Bloom's students as of the third quarter is, we need to reject the HO and we need to accept the HA, is more than or pwedeng greater than 89. That's it for today, my dear students. If you still have questions, please don't hesitate to comment down below. If you find this video helpful, please like and subscribe to my channel. So I'll see you next time. Bye!